come on in because my name is Deborah and I'm doing a recap review of the, you know what, I can't call it an exit interview because we really already had exit interviews for Morgan and Tony. But I guess this is where we're playing the third wheel on a date, the first date with Tony and Morgan. The first date. Y'all was the ones that dropped down in my comments and said, Deborah, you got to go watch the interview. You got to go watch the interview that Kojo did with Morgan and Tony. Because I hadn't watched it. I thought I was done for the season. And boy, oh boy, when I watched it, I said, you got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. But you know what? I'm glad I watched it. In fact, after I watched that interview, I felt like I was missing some things because they were telling stories, obviously, that Tony had told before. I guess Kojo had done another interview with Tony all by himself. And if y'all remember, I did the exit interview recap on the interview Tony did with, what's Simone's man's name over there on Ages and Stages? Rashid. I did my exit interview based off his interview with Rashid. And I never did a double back. And in fact, I had done that interview, prior to the reunion, actually, because he did an interview with him prior to the reunion. So I said, you know what? Let me go ahead and watch the interview he did with Kojo after the fact. And I'm going to combine the two. So this recap review, the information I'm going to be talking about is going to be more based on not just the date we went on with Tony and Morgan, but it's also going to be based off of the exit interview that Kojo did with Tony. But let me tell you, y'all, these two need to stop doing interviews. They really do, because each time they do an interview, yeah, I get more information. I definitely do get more information, but it ain't good information. Everybody's always talking about you shouldn't judge people just because you saw them on TV. You see this clip, you think you know them, and all this other kind of stuff. You're right. All you people are right. We don't know these people. All we know is what we see on TV. You are so right. All my reviews are based on what I see on TV, nothing more. I ain't hanging out with these people, but that's what reviews are about. Whether we're doing reviews about scripted TV shows or reality TV shows, all the reviews are about what we see on TV. We can't do it on nothing else. So I don't know, folks, just stop yelling at me. I don't have nothing else to go off of but what I see on TV. But let me tell you, anything else I see on TV with Morgan and Tony, actually, the more information I get, the worse it gets. It ain't getting better. It ain't getting better. It's getting worse. And let me tell you, this first date we went on with Tony and Morgan, I'm demoting Tony, y'all. I'm sorry to say. I've been calling him a Tony the Tiger all season long. Tony the Tiger all season long. But now I'm demoting Tony. Tony ain't no tiger, y'all. Tigger, what's that little fictional cartoon character? Back in the day, used to be on TV. Tigger the Tiger. Tony's now been demoted to Tigger the Tiger. Because you know what? I'm starting to see in Tony what Morgan has seen in Tony. Tony is a mark. Back in the day, we used to call people like Tony a mark. Tony is a mark. He ain't a tiger at all. And you know what? Morgan ran this whole little date interview they was on. She ran the whole show. Tony could barely get a word in edgewise. Every time he tried to open his mouth to say something more than 2 sentences long, Morgan would jump right into the conversation, cut him off, or speak for him. She can't control it. I did an exit interview on her, called her the rebellious spirit. Y'all should watch it. But her spirit is absolutely rebellious. Tony couldn't get a word in edgewise. I said, this ain't how no tiger act. No tiger lets himself get run over by no rebellious spirit. The rebellious spirit is stronger than Tony the Tiger. That's why he's been demoted to Tigger the Tiger. Morgan wanted the whole show to herself, her and her boobs. Her and them side boobs, girl. If it wasn't the side boobs, it was the hair. It was always something that we had to tend to with Morgan. She wanted the spotlight. She wanted to talk. It was the side boobs. It was the hair. I mean, come on, people. The attention that this girl needs. And let me tell you, they said it was a first date. Since they dated back in the earlier part of the season. And I guess this was the first day that Tony's paying for, because the dates on the show, I guess the producers or the TV show pays for. And Morgan ordered lobster. She said, on this first date I'm going with you, Tony, I'm ordering some expensive red wine and some lobster. Who orders lobster on the first date? Is that what you're supposed to? Isn't that a no, man? Men, when you take out a woman on the first date, what happens when she orders the most expensive thing on the menu, a lobster? And then we find out Tony's allergic to lobster, allergic to seafood, and she still orders seafood, and she could send this man into some kind of like allergy. What's it called when you get that little thing and you can't breathe and stuff because you're allergic to seafood? But then he was over there digging in her plate. So I'm like, is he really allergic to seafood? I don't know. But she ordered the lobster and some fancy red wine. And Tony was like, dang, that's too expensive. So Tony didn't order nothing. He ordered some water. This is what you do when you take a girl out on the first date and she orders the most expensive thing on the menu. And then the men realize, dang, I can't be paying for this date. I better just not order anything and order some water. So Tony didn't order anything. He sat up there in that fancy restaurant, ordered some water. They sat up there on a live interview in front of a public restaurant talking and ordered one plate. That's so ghetto. That's so ghetto to go to a restaurant, use a restaurant as a scene to film a private thing you're doing and order a one meal. Talking about we gonna share it. Oh, good Lord. These people, Tony and Morgan, I know they're gonna have a reality TV show. They definitely gonna have a reality TV show. And I'm thinking maybe that's the reason why Tony is hanging on to Morgan a little bit longer, because he might see some money coming in. He He says, I'm gonna attach myself to her. But Morgan loves all the attention. Morgan couldn't stop talking about how Tony was hunting her down and Tony couldn't get enough of her. She wanted to come on this show to make sure we all knew that as much as we talk about her and much as I talk about her rebellious spirit, she wanted us all to know that she can still get a man, that Tony is still a chasing her. That was what this whole show was about, to prove to you and I that she don't need to tone nothing down, her mouth, no nothing, because she's doing just fine. And look at here, a Tony still running up behind her. And she gave Tony a date night, a night date. Marcia over there couldn't get up from the, he couldn't make it up into the night. He only could have day dates with Marcia. So I guess he and Marcia ain't talking no more. So he slid Morgan back in. Morgan's back in because she's giving up the night dates. But I don't know, Tony, she ordered that lobster on you, and I could tell when she ordered that lobster, you told that waiter, oh, that's okay, I don't want nothing. I don't want nothing. He was so hungry, though. Even though he was allergic to seafood, he still took a bite of that those little linguine noodles. It must have been lobster and linguine, because he was still so hungry because he couldn't order no food. He still took a bite of it. You know you hungry when you got an allergy, but you still eat it. And this was just like a little PR thing for these two. They wanted to show that they are still friends. They're still together. They're starting to take it step by step, one day at a time, talk to each other, do all these things they said they're going to do in order to get back on track, taking it one day at a time. That's what Tony says. He wanted to show this, look here. Oh, we're not toxic. No, Tony, actually what you showed us is that you guys are toxic. That's actually what you showed us. Morgan showed me more of the rebellious spirit, and she's not humble, and all of that. And you actually showed me, Tony, that you really not Tony the Tiger. You Tony Tigger. Tony the Cub, Tigger. That's what I'm going to be demoting Tony to. And at first, when I was watching the little date interview, I was like, man, Tony really is let Morgan sit up here and run him, really run him. And he's still sniffing behind Morgan's back. And then I said, I don't know. I said, maybe I need to demote Tony. So that's what really made me go on over and watch this other interview with Kojo and Tony. And once I watched that, as you know, Kojo typically goes back in the history of people. Once he went back into the history of Tony, I was like, oh, shoot. Tony ain't no tiger. And let me tell you, Morgan has already figured it out. Morgan has already figured out that she can do whatever she wants to Tony, because Tony really isn't no tiger. Which means eventually Morgan gonna leave Tony alone, because remember what Morgan is looking for is a man that can put her in her place. She has told us that. She has a rebellious spirit. She can't control it. She needs a man who's gonna have a strong arm and put her in her place. And what we're finding out is Tony doesn't have a strong hand. He doesn't have a strong hand, and he can't control Morgan. And I'm actually finding out that there may be a lot of situations where Tony has been played in relationships. Tony has been the one that has been getting played in relationship. Now, he doesn't recognize it. So he thinks he's running the show. But the reality of it is, when he starts to talk about a lot of his past relationships, just like the one we're looking here with Morgan, I'm finding out that a lot of the times it was the women who he felt he got played by. Well, you can't be both, Tony. You can't be Tony the Tiger, but then claim you got played by everybody, because we know that in this series, Ready to Love, Morgan played Tony. He got played. He got played by Morgan. Morgan got her revenge in the end. And what Morgan is sitting here on this date telling us is, not only did I exact revenge on this man at the end of Ready to Love, make a fool out of him, look at here, he's still running up behind me. He's still running up behind me, and I'm playing him some more right here. So what Tony is telling me is that he can't handle Morgan. He really isn't Tony the Tiger. Morgan is still playing him. But let me get back to this part when I'm saying that I'm demoting Tony from Tony the Tiger to Tigger or a cub. Because we absolutely know, remember this, we absolutely know that Morgan played Tony in this Ready to Love season. She absolutely played him. Even in the interview that he did with Kojo, the solo interview, they got into this long back and forth debate over, was Tony jealous of Lyndon? Was all that rage and anger he was showing, was it jealousy? And Tony was firm in saying, no, it wasn't jealousy. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't jealousy one bit. And Kojo was trying to get him to admit that it was jealousy. It was jealousy. It was jealousy. And he said, no, it wasn't jealousy. And he said, well, what was it? And he said, what it was, I felt sorry for Lyndon. I felt sorry for Lyndon. So now he cares about Lyndon. Okay, Tony. I felt sorry for Lyndon that Morgan was playing him. Listen to what I'm saying. He said he felt sorry for Lyndon that he had already had Morgan locked up. She was my girl. She was mine. Those were his words. She was mine. But yet she was over here playing Lyndon. Well, actually, Tony, all of that happened before decision day, which means she wasn't actually playing Lyndon. She was playing you too. So you felt sorry for Lyndon, but you should have been feeling sorry for yourself, because Morgan was playing Lyndon and she was playing you, because at the end of the show, she rejected you. So once again, how can you be a tiger? How can you be a tiger if you are seeing your girl, your woman, as you say, play another man, but yet it doesn't change the way you think about her? Listen to this, people. Tony sat up here and told us that he saw Morgan playing Lyndon, playing him for a fool, as he says. You saw your girl that you say is yours, playing in your face. Not only was she playing Lyndon, as you say, she's also playing in your face, straight in your face. She's doing you dirty right in your face. You say she's just doing Lyndon dirty. Nah, she's doing you dirty too. So she's playing in your face. She's playing with Lyndon. Lyndon has the good sense to say, I don't want to have nothing to do with Morgan. Lyndon has the good sense to tell Morgan when she asks, do you think we got a chance? Do you think we're ready to love? Do you think I'm the one for you? Lyndon had the wherewithal, the guts, the real thing to say, no, Morgan, I wouldn't put up with this. I'm not for you. But you, Tony, you put up with it. You accepted it. Not only did you accept it, even after she did it to you too and played you, here you are sitting right back here on this date, paying for a whole lobster dinner in which you're allergic to seafood. Who's the real fool, Tony? Is it Lyndon or is it you? Who's the real tiger? Is it Lyndon is the tiger or you the tiger? No, you a cub, Tony. You a cub. Morgan has played you worse, way worse than she has played Lyndon. Way worse. And then Tony sat up here and said that he got played by Natasha. Tony has told us that it was Natasha who told producers that they were dating. It was Natasha who was setting up Tony. As Tony tells the story, we just gonna go off what Tony said. Whether y'all believe it or not, I know some of you said Natasha said she didn't tell the producers, but we gonna go off of Tony's words. We wanna go off what Tony was thinking, because we wanna understand that based on what you was thinking, why did you do what you did? Now here we have a situation where Tony was over here, according to him, getting to know Natasha, going out with Natasha. And what he's telling us is that behind his back, Natasha was playing him and going over and telling the producers about what they was doing. That's what Tony's saying. This is what Tony is saying. Tony is saying that he got played by Natasha. He got betrayed by Natasha. So now here we are, Tony. Here we are again, Tony. Are you saying that another woman on this show has played you? I can't keep calling you a tiger when you've already told me 2 women have played you. You told me Natasha played you. She played in your face. She tricked you. She bamboozled you. She lied to you. And now you tell me Morgan played in your face with Lyndon. But somehow or another, you feel sorry for Lyndon, but you don't feel sorry for yourself. Once again, can Tony be a tiger when he's getting played by 2 women? I thought tigers played the other women. We finding out from Tony that no, I didn't play any of these women. These women played me. This is what he's telling us. I'm going by his words. He got played by not only Natasha, he's telling us he got played by Morgan as well. And he's still sitting up here on his 3rd date, chasing behind Morgan, eating a linguine with lobster that he says he's afraid of, and he's still willing to die for her. Who's the fool? Is Lyndon the fool or is Tony the fool? But you know what, people? This didn't just start on Ready Love. This is why I like Okojo's interviews, because he went back. I said, where did this start? Is this just Ready Love? But no. Tony tells us the story that he grew up in the hood. And we met his older sister, but he had some older brothers too. He grew up in a poor family, in the hood, in a poor family. He says his mother was on welfare, trying to raise a lot of kids. I don't remember. I think it's like 6 or 7 of them. He got a lot of siblings. We learned from his interview with Rashid that he was raised by a lot of women, a lot of them. If you watch my exit interview there, I did a little bit more deep analysis on what I thought Tony was going through, why I thought maybe where some of his assertiveness and aggressiveness came from, being raised by a bunch of women. I still believe it. But he gave us some more information that tells me more that Tony ain't no tiger. Because you know who else knows Tony's not a tiger? Remember when Tony kept saying none of his family and friends says he's this person? Remember he kept saying that? And we kept saying, wow, how could they say that? This is what we see in Tony. Because what his family friends know about Tony is Tigger. His friends know he is a cup. Does that mean he's not assertive and has some aggressiveness to him and jealousy? Absolutely he does. But he gets played by women a lot. Remember his sister came and Tony was like telling him that Morgan could be the one? And what did his sister say? His sister said to Tony, yeah, Tony, you say that about all the women. That was our first clue, that Tony falls for women and he gets falls for women a lot. We saw in his interview with Kojo that he's in these long relationships, 5 years, 6 years, 4 years, 3 years. So he's not running around for woman. But he always describes these scenarios in which he got played. And you know who else knew he couldn't handle women like Morgan? Probably that friend he came to vet Morgan. Remember they had Meet the Homies? And he didn't tell the friend what Morgan did. He didn't tell the friend that Morgan had put Nair in the ex-friend. And his friend was mad and said, man, that was a big piece of information. Why didn't you tell me that? And at the time, he said, I didn't tell my friend because I didn't think it was important. No, he didn't tell his friend, 1, because he didn't want his friend to know. And 2, because his friend would have told him, man, you messing around with another woman that you might get taken advantage of by. His friend knew Tony's history with women. His friend knew the history that Tony has gotten played by women in the past. And once again, he was with another woman that was about to play him. And he didn't want to let his friend know that he was on the same path he's been to all the time. And you know why else I know this is a pattern? Because he talks about that when he grew up in the hood, he talked about how his older brother, what was his older brother's name? I forget. It was like a name like C or something. Brother C. He looked up to his brother C. But you know what his brother C did? He said his brother C protected him. His brother C, I think, was in the streets, but his brother C was smart. That's one thing he said. He said his brother C got all straight A's in school, but it looks like his brother C had to go to the streets to make some money for the family. That's what I read in between the lines. What I read in between the lines, that Tony's family was poor, the mother was poor, didn't have enough money to raise all the kids, and the older brother C had to turn to the streets very early to make money to provide for the household. He had to step up and be a father figure to probably a lot of these kids in the house because the mother couldn't afford to take care of all the kids. But what the brother, and so the brother C was very smart, probably could have, if, I think he's turned his life around. That's what Tony did say at one point. He's turned his life around 180 degrees. But it sounds like his brother C was smart, but one of these kids that had to hit the streets early in order to make money, to hustle to make money, he probably got into some things he shouldn't have got into. But what Tony said was that his brother C protected him. His brother C knew that Tony was no tiger. The brother C knew Tony wasn't made for the streets. The brother C said, Tony, stay away from here. The brother wouldn't let Tony hang around him in the streets. The brother wouldn't let Tony see what he was doing. The brother protected Tony because he was no tiger. He wasn't made for the streets. He wasn't made for this life. He's not about this life. The fast girls, all this. He really couldn't handle it. And I believe that this is around the age when Tony decided he did want women like that. I think it was to prove to his brother, his older brother, and to prove that he could handle women like Morgan. And he's competitive. He says he was an athlete. He played basketball. He did a lot of basketball playing. He wasn't good enough to go to the pros, but he did go to college. He was a popular kid. He was a popular kid. He wasn't necessarily that good in the books in high school. He didn't even get into books until later on because a guidance counselor saw potential in Tony and said, you know what, you ought to think about going into accounting. So that means even that guidance counselor told him, I see something in you. You're not for the streets. I see something in you. You could be something better. You don't have to just be a basketball player. You could be something better. And that's what made Tony get into accounting and go on and get a master's degree. See, that never really added up to me with Tony because an accountant, that's a very specific career. You have to be disciplined to be an accountant. You have to have a level of discipline to you. So it never did line up. A lot of it didn't line up to me with the discipline you need as an accountant. I knew he had a master's degree, but yet he seemed so undisciplined in his behavior, in his reactions, this outburst, this anger. And I think that Tony did want to be the bad boy. I do. I think that Tony really does want to be the bad boy. I think he wanted to be the bad boy back in the streets with his brother. I think he liked that. I think he looked up to it. I think he wanted the college, the ball life. I think he wanted all the women that come with that life. I think that Tony really did want to be a bad boy. And I think he still does want to be a bad boy. But here's the problem. When I talk about nature versus nurture. Remember I told you the nature of Morgan is she's a rebellious spirit. That's not nurtured. She's a rebellious spirit. That is her core. That's who she is. She doesn't need to act. I think Tony's the opposite, y'all. I think Tony's nature, really, his real true nature probably isn't to be as bad as he is. But I think that's the personality he likes to nurture. I think it's the one he likes to nurture. But I think at his core, he's no match for Morgan. He's no match at all. There are too many stories that Tony told of his life that tells me that he is not always the assertive one, the aggressive one, the tiger in the relationship. He has 2 children by 2 different women. And there was another story he told that told me, oh, wait a minute, that's not a tiger move. It was the story of when he had a girlfriend, the one that's in Miami, that's the one that's the mother of, I think, his 11-year-old son. He talks about her, says she's a wonderful mother. He has very nice things to say about her. And he says that they dated long distance for a long time, 4 or 5 years. And he lived in Connecticut. She lived in Miami. Well, when it came time for them, I think the baby, that she got pregnant or something. And, she ended up, as he says, I think there came a time when they got pregnant. The two of them got pregnant. He wants to say she ended up pregnant. No, listen, ladies, she got pregnant because there was no birth control. And a lot of men, like Tony, leave birth control up to women. They do. They don't want to wear a condom. They don't want to get vasectomies. They don't want to do anything that they want to do. They want to leave all the birth control up to women. So women have to be on birth control for 20 years right? Or they have to be doing all other sorts of things, and they leave it all up to the women. And if the women fail to do the birth control correctly, miss a step, then guess what? They end up pregnant, as Tony says. They end up pregnant. There's a whole discussion about that too. But let me get back to my point. My point is that when it came time for them to live together, to join their households together, Tony had a good job in Connecticut. He was working for the government in Connecticut. He had a good job. He said he had a good job in Connecticut. And what the decision came would be that Tony would pack up all his belongings and he would move all the way to Miami. Not her move to where he is. If he's the head of the household, he's the breadwinner, he's the one that's going to be providing for the family, I would think that she would pack up and move to Connecticut. But no, I'm going off these traditional roles that these people like to talk about. But no, you know who packed up and moved? Tony. He packed up and moved to Miami. And he says once he got to Miami, he had a hard time finding a job because they wanted bilingual people. I believe it. I've seen that happen down in Miami. They do want bilingual people, so I believe the story. He said he had a hard time of finding a job. He was having to take whatever kind of job he could get just to get money coming in. He was taking staff accountant jobs when he was really way above that. He said it took him 6 months to get a real nice paying job in Miami, to get his footing. But he was the one that uprooted himself. He was the one that slid the rug out underneath him to run to Florida to live in the house and share a house with this woman. So once again, Tony chased after that woman. Why didn't that woman move to Connecticut where he was? Why didn't she make the move? That's not a tiger move. That's not a tiger move. I'm not saying anything is wrong with the move. I'm not saying anything is wrong with the move, but it's not the tiger move. And what I'm telling you, when I put these stories together, between the guidance counselor, the sister, when she told him, you think every woman's the one, the brother who had to protect Tony in the neighborhood and keep him away from the streets because he knew he wasn't about that life. When I see how Morgan played him, when I see how he tells us Natasha played him, when I see how when the situation came with the baby, with the mother of his child, how she had him move to Florida and she didn't move to Connecticut. When I see the moves he's made, the decisions he's made, what it's pointing to, it is pointing to a man that more than likely allows women to rule him. He allows women to make decisions for him, even though those decisions are not the best decisions. Even when I told you in the first reason why I feel that Tony does have some assertiveness and aggression towards women, I think he was ruled by women when he was young. I do. I still believe that. And I still believe to this day, he still allows it to happen. He allows women to get the upper hand on him. Call it whatever you want. Getting played, get the upper hand, get the best of him, whatever you want to call it. There's too many stories Tony tells me where when I look at the situation, the only thing he's getting out of it is sex. The only thing he got out of Natasha was sex. But what he's saying is Natasha played him and he almost could have messed up his relationship with Morgan. The only thing Tony is getting away from this is sex. He had a wonderful son, that's right. But in the end, he gave up a career, had to suffer through some very financial woes because of sex with the mother of his child. He says he thought she was the one, but he didn't think she was the one enough to marry him. He said he thought she was the one, but he said they had problems. That's why he didn't propose to her. This tells me that Tony is ruled by emotion a lot of the times. He's ruled by his emotions. And if you're going to be a man out here ruled by your emotions, like his brother C, you ain't made for this life. You not made for this life. And I'm telling Tony the same thing right now with Morgan. Tony, you are not made for this life with Morgan. Introduce Morgan to your brother C. He might have turned his life around 180 degrees, but he's got a good instinct. He's got the street instinct. I want you to introduce Morgan to your brother and tell him everything. And I want you to find out what your brother says. Because your brother C seems the one that knows the streets. He knows women from the streets. He knows how they behave. He knows what they do. He knows what to look out for. And he tried to protect you from women like that. He tried to make you just go on, man, and go to college, play ball, get you a nice girl from college, settle down and go off in the world. But no, Tony wanted to live that life like his brother was living. He wanted to rule women. He wanted to come off like, I can handle my own. I'm not weak. I'm strong. He wants to prove to everybody that he can handle a woman like Morgan. And here he is on this date, sitting in this fancy restaurant with a beautiful view in the background, paying for fancy wine, expensive lobster that he's allergic to, linguine. He can't even order no meal for himself, not even a salad, not even nothing to drink. He's drinking water, all to prove to us that he can handle a woman like Morgan. I don't believe it. Just like your brother C didn't believe it, I don't believe it either. You know what this story reminds me of? We were sitting over here waiting for Mark Anthony and Mercedes to be Love Jones. That's what I was saying. Oh, we're going to have a Love Jones. We're going to have Mark Anthony be Lorenz Tate and Mercedes was going to be Nia Long. I said, it's going to be they're going to get back together. It's going to be a Nia Long and Lorenz Tate, Love Jones redo. I was all excited for it. We know that didn't happen. But you know what? We did get Nia Long. We did get a situation where we did get a Nia Long movie. But you know what Nia Long movie we got? We got Boys in the Hood. Tony's life is Boys in the Hood. And Doughboy is Tony's brother C. And you know who Tony is? Tony is Cuba Gooding Jr. Tony is a Cuba Gooding Jr. He's a mix of Cuba Gooding Jr. and what was the other boy's name? And he was Cuba Gooding Jr. and Morris Chestnut. Remember when the scene in the Boys in the Hood and they was mad because of Morris Chestnut got killed, and so they was riding around in the lowrider, and Trey, that was his name in the character. Trey was Cuba Gooding Jr. Cuba Gooding. Trey was crying. He was all mad. He wanted to seek revenge. And he was trying to roll with Doughboy. And Doughboy looked in the back at him and said, boy, you ain't made for this life. Get on out the car. You ain't made for this get back life. Get on out the car. And they dropped him off on the corner, and Doughboy went ahead and took care of business. That is Tony. Tony is Lil Trey. Tony is a Cuba Gooding Jr., whatever his name is. That's who Tony is. Tony ain't made for this life. He want to be about this life. He wants to prove that he's about this life. He wants to prove he's tough. But too many people have spoken up in this whole series. And the more he talks, the more I'm going to find out. He needs to stop doing interviews. Because the more he talks, the more I realize that he's not about this life. That he is trying to nurture a part of him he needs to stop nurturing because it's not really him. And he's dealing with a woman like Morgan where it is her nature. It is her nature. She's the real deal. She is the real deal. If Tony's not careful, he's gonna change in this movie from Boys in the Hood from being Little Trey to being a Ricky. Ricky was Morris Chestnut. If he's not careful, he's going to become Ricky in this movie, and he's going to get got by the Morgans of the world. He really, really ought to be careful, because if he's not careful, he's going to go from being Trey to being Little Ricky, where a Morgan is going to be seeking revenge on him and out here shooting him. Not actually shooting him, but figuratively. Okay? That's what I'm saying. Figuratively. He really ought to be careful before he has a baby with Morgan, or she figuratively shoots him and destroys him, just like Trey, not Trey, just like a Ricky was killed and destroyed in that movie in Boys in the Hood. He is living the Boys in the Hood movie. Anyway, that's it, y'all. I will talk to you later. Bye.